Alright, so in this video we're going to practice finding the distance formula, using the distance formula to find the distance between 2 points on the coordinate grid. So in our first example we want to find the distance between the points 5, -1, and 3, 7. So what I've done is circled my x's, which are 5 and 3, and my y's, which are -1 and 7. So if you look at our formula, we have the square root of the difference of the x's squared plus the difference of the y squared. So what I did here is I substituted my x's, which were 3 and 5, and I subtracted them, 3 minus 5 squared, plus the difference of my y's, that's actually 7 minus -1. 7 minus -1 actually ends up being 7 plus 1 because two negatives make a positive. We square that. So 3 minus 5 is -2 squared. 7 plus 1 is 8 squared. -2 squared turns out to be 4. 8 squared turns out to be 64. When I add 4 plus 64, that equals 68. And the square root of 68, if you type it in the calculator, is about 8.25. So let's try one. I want to find the distance between the points 1, 3, and 5, 7. So what I'll do first is circle my x's, and then I'll circle my y's. So again, my formula is the square root of the difference of my x's squared plus the difference of my y squared. So if I drop my x's in here, I have 1 minus 5 squared. And I drop my x's in here, or y's in here, and I have 3 minus 7 squared. So what I want to do first in the calculator is do everything underneath the square root first. So I'm going to go ahead and type all this right here in the calculator. Figure out what that is. So I know that when I type this in the calculator, I get the square root of 32. This ends up being -4 squared, which is 16. This ends up being -4 squared, which is 16. 16 plus 16 is 32. So the square root of 32, when I take that in the calculator, is approximately 5.66. In example 2, I need to take the distance between -8 and -9 and -4, -10. I have a lot of negatives here. So I'm going to circle my x's, which are -8 and -4, and my y's are -9 and -10. So what I'm just going to do is drop those into my equation here. I have the square root. So what I know is I have the difference of my x's plus the difference of my y's. So what we have to do is be real careful with how we drop these in here. The x's I have are -8 and -4, so -8 minus -4 squared. And then the difference of my y's, which is -9 minus -10 squared. So again, what I'm going to do next is type all of this in the calculator here first, underneath my square root, and then we'll take the square root at the end. So when I type that in the calculator, I'm going to leave the square root to the end. -8 minus -4 quantity squared, don't forget the parentheses, plus parentheses -9 minus -10 parentheses squared. When I type this in the calculator, I get 17. And when I type the square root of 17 in the calculator, I'll get a little bit more than 4. In fact, it's 4.12 approximately. Now, depending on what the directions they ask you to do, they might either let you keep it as a radical, square root of 17, or they might have you round it to a certain decimal place. In this case, they want us to round it to 2 decimal places. So my answer was actually 4.123, which rounded to 4.12. Looking at my next example, I want to find the distance between the points 10, 6, and 1, negative 4. So my x's are 10 and 1, and my y's are 6 and negative 4. So plugging this into my formula, I have the square root of the difference of my x's squared plus the difference of my y's squared. So again, I drop my x's in there, 10 minus 1 squared, and the difference of my y's would be 6 minus negative 4 squared. So again, I type all of this underneath my square root first to get my answer before I take the square root. So if I type parentheses 10 minus 1 quantity squared plus parentheses 6 minus negative 4, close your parentheses, squared, I get an answer of 85. Now when I type in the square root of 85, I get 9.219, which rounds to approximately 9.22, because again the directions ask us for 2 decimal places. In the next example, I want to find the difference between 3.2 and 8.2. So again, I circle my x values, and I circle my y values. Again, inside my equation, I'm going to find the difference of my x's squared plus the difference of my y's squared. My x's would be 3 minus 8 quantity squared, and the difference of my y's would be 2 minus 2 squared. So again, when I type all of this in the calculator right here underneath the radical, so I'll type in parentheses 3 minus 8, close your parentheses, squared, plus parentheses 2 minus 2, close your parentheses, squared. When I type that in the calculator, I should get the square root of 25. When I take the square root of 25, that is exactly 5. Looking at my next example, I need to find the distance between 9, negative 3 and negative 1, 8. Again, my x's are 9 and negative 1, and my y's are negative 3 and 8. Typing this into my equation, I'm going to take the difference of my x's squared plus the difference of my y's squared. So again, my x's are 9 and negative 1, 9 minus negative 1 quantity squared, and my y's are negative 3 minus 8 quantity squared. Again, I type everything underneath the radical into my square root, underneath the radical into my calculator, and then we'll square root it at the end. So type in 9 minus negative 1 squared plus quantity negative 3 minus 8 squared. So you should get the answer of 221. And when I take the square root of 221, it's 14.866, which to 2 decimal places is 14.87.